So, okay, here we go. It's Christmas Day, or evening, 2024, and I spoke with my daughter, and I'm making all these videos about my past, and I mentioned some of the kind of wild stuff that I was involved in when I was a racer. I was a crew chief on Top Fuel Cars and Funny Cars for probably 15 years, and I was probably with 7 or 8 different camps over that 15 years. Some of the teams were just very wild, and some were just into racing, and that was it. So my daughter asked me about what are a couple of the things that you really remember, distinctive things that you remember. And so I got to thinking about it, and I mentioned a couple, and she wanted me to put them on video, so that's what I'm going to do. The wildest one will be at the end of this video, so stay tuned. Actually, it's just memorable stuff. Like, we traveled a lot. We'd race on a weekend. Sometimes we would race Seattle, Portland, and Spokane in a weekend. So if you throw in all the driving and the racing, we got real tired. And then we had to go back to our shops and work during the week to make some money to buy more stuff, to blow more stuff up. And now these cars were really expensive to run. They were the nitro cars in those days. To start the car, pull up to the bleach box or snot box or whatever you want to call it. It's where they'd have some water on the ground, and the car would do a burnout, go out about 8th mile. In those days they did longer burnouts, and back up and back up behind the starting line, do a couple hops to spin the stuff off the tires, and then pull up, stage the car, and make a pass. And in that amount of time, it'd use about 10 gallons of fuel. Now, we were running, they don't run this much anymore, but we were running 96, 98% nitro. They have it cut way back into the 80s, I think now, 80%. And nitro was about $10 a gallon. So if you figure it out, it was about $300 a pass just for fuel. These things are very loud and very violent. And I guess that's what the spectators go to see. And one of the things I remember doing, since they put this much fuel through them in a short period of time, even when they're idling, it'll be like it's what comes out of the headers is just, it's a mist, and it's full of this nitro, and it burns your eyes and you can't breathe. And when I would be hanging onto the starter and deciding when we'd start this thing, because it has a detachable starter on the upper blower pulley. It's a big old aircraft piece of electric motor. And I used to like it. They have these upswept headers, and they go back a little bit. And we would fill the block they don't have radiators or anything like that, but we would have these water necks on the back of the heads, and we would fill the blocks with water to make them heat evenly. And there'd be a little tube that went into the front header, and if you filled it a little overfull down in the swoop of the header, it would get a little bit of water. So when I'd start these things, I'd usually wait till some spectator, unknowing, would kind of stand in the way, 10 feet away, but in the way of what was coming out of the header. And when they weren't suspecting, we'd flash this thing off, and it'd cover them with water or whatever. And you'd see people that were standing there watching, they'd scatter because their eyes would be burning and they couldn't breathe. And then some of the boyfriends would be macho, showing off to their girlfriends that they could stay there. So that was a normal thing that happened 3-4 times a day. If we'd go deep into the race, couple qualifying passes and a couple rounds or 3 rounds. And I remember that fairly well. That's not really one of the most memorable moments. Actually, one of the things that I remember most is we traveled up and down the West Coast a lot. And whenever we would go through Wolf Creek, which is a little turn off on, I-5 down there in Oregon, they had the best cinnamon rolls of any place I had ever been. So whenever I would be in a truck going through Wolf Creek, we'd have to stop. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go to this little truck stop and get a cinnamon roll. They were the best. It's strange how you remember stupid stuff like that. So, another thing I remember is, now this just goes to show you how stupid we were. We were in Boise, Idaho, and we were doing a display in this little nightclub thing. It had a dance floor, and I'll try and insert a picture of the car on display in the dance floor, on the dance floor, and it had all these. This was in the 70s, late 70s, and it had smoke that came down, and maybe it was from dry ice or something, and it had all these lights, the neon lights that were, bent around, and they were in the rafters and stuff. And so we're displaying the car, and we have the body up, and we're giving a little talk, and the owner of the place, or the manager of the place, I don't know, some guy that had some pull there, wanted us to start this thing in this nightclub. And I told him it's probably a bad idea, because even out in the open, when we start these cars, people scatter just because their eyes burn and they can't breathe. And this guy started flashing some cash, and of course we needed money, so we did a little negotiation, and we decided we would start the thing inside this club. And so he was very insistent that we do this. I knew better, but how do you turn down money? So we warn people that if, they might want to go outside, because even outside these things will burn your eyes and stuff, but in a confined space, I mean, they put off so much fuel and fumes and noise. It was one of the bad ideas that we had. So we start this thing up, and as much air as they put out through the headers, I mean a tremendous amount of air, it blew all the dust off, all the rafters and all the lights, and it was just, it got really filthy in there because I don't think they ever dusted up in the rafters and the lights and all that. And with all the air coming out of the engine, out the headers, massive amounts of dirt and dust came down from the ceiling. But there weren't many people to experience that, because when we started it, and people's eyes started to burn, and their ears hurt so bad that everybody scattered outside. They left. They only ran for their lives, I think. So we just flashed it off for a very short period of time, you know, not a minute or anything, not even half a minute, I don't think. No, it would have been about 15 seconds. And so the owner of the place, or this guy that wanted us to do it, I mean, he was pretty impressed, and he said he'd never do that again. And from what I understand, all the people were out of the club, and they left their coats, they left everything, because this is not something you normally experience. So we shut it off, and we take the car and put it in the trailer and hang out there afterwards for a while and talk to the patrons of the place. And come to find out that when we did that, somebody robbed the business. And I didn't hear about it for weeks after, till weeks after. And the more I look back on it, I think that the guy that wanted us to start that car wanted to use it as a diversion so he could have somebody rob his business for some reason. But I heard that they were in financial straits. So I think something nefarious went on there. And by God, we were part of it. But we heard about that from spectators or people that went to the drag races for years after. Every time we'd go to the Firebird Raceway, people would come up and they'd want to talk to us about when we started our car in this place. I forget what it was. I think it was called something like the gas station or something like that. But we were famous for that. We weren't famous for our racing as much as we were for just being and doing something that stupidly ridiculous. So that story will remain on the record for my daughter Brooke, because she didn't know about it. But there's a picture on the wall here. It's in a frame. It's got a glass front. I'll take a picture of it and I'll try and have it across the top of the video a little bit, and you can see that the inside this club, it had all these neon lights and smoke and all that, and I'm sure I'm going to have to use a flash, so it's going to have a round light where the flash from the cell phone reflects back, but you might get an idea of what this place was like, what we did, and why we were famous. We're just absolutely famous. Okay,